Hello everyone, welcome to the Psychology of Adolescence. Today we are going to continue chapter 3 on cognitive psychology of adolescence. Just to review for the last session, we thought about the basic unit of brain structure, and then we review the major developmental psychology including Piaget and Vygotsky. And then we just focused on what happened cognitively during adolescence. And today we are going to continue regarding cognitive characteristics of adolescence and what happened. And the intelligence this is one of the topics of today's lesson. Just to see that you know that this person is Einstein, is very smart and probably one of the most intelligent the man in our history. And his IQ is just approximately 160. That's just approximation, and we just imagine based on his achievement. And what do you think about your IQ? Probably at least one time in your life, in your school year, probably you took different kinds of IQ, and maybe you are very satisfied about your IQ score, or maybe you feel that your score doesn't reflect on your the intelligence. So we're going to thought about what is intelligence and what is intelligence test that tells us. So that is a basic content for today, and this is just a brief outline of today's lecture. First, we are going to think about information processing at the perspective, meaning that what kind of a procedure included when we got the information visually or auditory, and then what kind of a process happens in our brain. That is the first topic. And then second topic, and I just told you as an introduction, that is intelligence. People focus on individual differences in terms of the capacity of our intelligent the capability. So we are going to talk about that intelligent test. And then finally, we're going to think about social cognition. Okay, first topic is information processing view. The people have different the capacity and different the speed. So, for example, even though the same classes the students take, but after class, when we ask the questions about what you learn in class, then probably some students can remember more, or some students can remember very little information. And what can we explain why this, the students have a different in terms of the information they digested during the same the class? Maybe we can explain that the cognitive resources is different in terms of capacity, how much information they can handle at the same time, or how much speed they can speed up to process or to understand or to give us some meaning to it. So that is a basic characteristics in information process. So we can explain the people's cognitive process using cognitive resources. And then after that, they explain that each step of information processing procedure, first step is attention and memory. So actually, the attention is the first step to have information processing. So when we have some attention and we just select some of the object to understand, first of all, we needed to pay attention to the object. For example, if you wanted to recognize your mother when you are young, then probably first step, even though you are unconscious, you just select the object out of the many different women, but you just select one person and then pay attention to differentiate your mother from other women. So pay attention either visually or auditory or sensory attention. It's regardless of the sources of attention, that is the first step, to pay attention. And then the memory, it's a very important thing in terms of our cognitive understanding. If you can remember anything after you pay attention to something, then probably it's no way you can accumulate some of the information which is very critical when you leave. So if the babies cannot remember the mother's the face, and every time she has to pay attention to and figure out who these persons are, then probably it's very hard to live their life. So we have the cognitive capability to memorize and to remember. That is a memory. So when we say that the memory, there is two different types of the memory. It's the first short-term memory and long-term memory. And then when we explain that what kind of memories turn into the long-term memory, we using the working memory, that is the definition. So working memory is that to make some of the information is more handsable or the manageable to reserve in our long-term memory system. So we call that is a working memory. So that is another very important the information processing procedure. That is a memory stage. And then third step, we call the cognitive control. That is the inhibition. So sometimes we have to inhibit some of the activities of the cognition. So in that way, we can select the activities and we can just give our full energy to understand. And otherwise, probably attention deficit disorder, the children, they have a difficulty to control their cognitive activity sometimes. So very active cognitively in every stimulus and every activities. Then it's very difficult to concentrate on the more significant activities in, if you can do the cognitive control. So we found that during the adolescence, our capability to control cognitively. So in that way, if we need, we can inhibit those capabilities more increased. The capability to control some of our cognitive the capability. And then another, it's more advanced, our cognitive function, we call that is a executive functioning. Sometimes we call the high order complex cognitive processes also included. And we are going to see that those examples. So this is more high order cognitive process, decision making and critical thinking and creative thinking, expertise and metacognition. And I want to more focus on these capabilities as characteristics of adolescence, because attention and memory and also the cognitive inhibition, it's also we can see that we can observe even the childhood or the children, they shows that they know how to pay attention to and they can memorize something, and also they can selectively choose some activities and using their inhibition capability. But this is more high order and more complex, the procedure to process of the information we got from the outward. So I'm going to just explain each by each. First, decision making. And if you don't have any capability to make a decision, then probably all the time you're probably very anxious, indecisive person. The emotion is anxiety. So young adolescents, they are more likely to generate different options, and they can examine the situation from a different the perspective to see what is the pros and cons. And then they anticipate the consequences of the decision. So you remember that the adolescents, from Piaget perspective, Piaget theory, we can think using abstract concepts. Even though there is no the concrete examples, we can handle abstract the idea. So using those ability before decision making or those decision making process, we can expect or we can imagine what's going to happen if I choose these options. If I get married with this person, what's my married life is going to be. And you can probably examine there what's the pros and cons. So that is abilities that the young adults can have. And finally, consider the credibility of the sources. So to make a decision, we need to use some of the information or some of the consultation from other peoples. The young adults, they have the capability to see that how trustable or how credible of these sources are. So using those more credible information, they can make a decision, good decision, hopefully. And when the young adults, adolescents, they make this decision, the social context, especially the presence of peers, is a very important the factor the adolescents have influence by. So considering those, the role of context, the people say the role playing and also group problem solving has a lot of benefits to make a good, making good decision. So before making a decision, if you play a role, so for example, if you want to choose your career as a teacher, then you don't know what's your real life as a teacher. But before making a decision, if you play a role in a group situation with your friends, you can get a feedback and you can have a sense of it, how feasible of your style as a teacher. So it's lots of benefit. And also group problem solving, so you can learn how other the students and your friends making a decision and how they're using the information in a different way. So that is a very the good way to increase your capability of the good decision-making skills. So that is one of kind of a complex information processing capability that is a decision-making. And another, the information processing, we call the critical thinking. Critical meaning, what is a critical? That is a very essential, very important, the skills of our capability. And it says that think reflectively and productively and evaluating evidence. That is a criteria, the critical thinking. So reflectively meaning that you can think about your think. Rather than you just think and then make an action. Reflection meaning that before making the important decision, you can think whether is it really the best options and or the best solution and so forth. And then productively, and also you can evaluate the evidence to prove that this is a good decision or not. So that is critical thinking. So it's very important adolescents have to learn to think critical, the thinking, rather than instinctually just see that, oh, I feel like it, I wanted to do it, and then just to make a decision right away, not using the critical thinking, that it can be dangerous. So we need to teach the adolescents, and also you need to learn how to the critical think before doing something. So there is a full list of the factors to improve the critical thinking. First of all, you can increase the speed, automaticity, and capacity of information processing. So meaning that you are required to speed up or to process more information, to see that, to handle reflectively and also productively. So that is a capacity issues actually. And then secondly, if you know a wide range of the information, meaning that if you read more, and also if you meet diverse friends, and if you have lots of different places, you have a trip, then you are exposed to the many different kinds of information. That kind of information, widest of the knowledge, it's going to be helpful to think more critically rather than narrow-minded person. And thirdly, if you have the ability to construct a new combination, even though you have a wide range of knowledge, but you don't know how to combine, that is necessary in certain situation, then it's the knowledge sometimes it's useless. So the third skills is necessary is that to combine, how to combine. So in that way, you can construct the concept. And finally, also spontaneous uses of strategies and procedure. It can be related to the creativity. So even though you don't learn something how to use your information or knowledge before, but if you have a certain spontaneous sense of it, how to use your experiences or your knowledge or the sources from other people's, it can be very helpful to increase your critical thinking. And I just mentioned then creativity that is can be related to critical thinking. When we say that creativity, that is another name of divergent thinking style. So this is two kind of a measure, two different groups of the thinking style. Convergent thinking is the more narrow down your options, so more focus on something. So if you using convergent thinking, then probably you like the more simplified procedure. So you can, if you have too much complex information, this kind of person feeling that I'm so confused, I need to narrow down and I need a more logical process to understand those two different natures of information. This kind of the thinking process is like that. But on the contrary, divergent thinking is that the wide different kinds of information, they are welcome and they enjoy the process and getting more expand their idea. And then they are not really overwhelmed of those expansion of the information and knowledge. So creativity is that think in novel, new ways, and discover unique solution to problems. So usually convergent thinking is that they call the good students because they follow the rule very well. But divergent thinking sometimes it's not really feasible in a reality because sometimes they find that a new way, never people used it, and this divergent thinking people, they are very excited about it. So sometimes the two creative person, they have a difficult time to adjust it in their real life, but it's necessary. We need to learn how to creatively and how to divergent think to solve certain problems in certain situation. And expertise. And you know that expert, they are kind of opposite to the novice. Novice is another name of the beginner. Then how can we differentiate the expert from novice? What is the differences? So if you see that the pianist, for example, if there's the novice, the pianist, and there's the expert, the pianist, what's the differences? Researchers say that the expert people, they are very easily detect the features and meaningful patterns more easily. So usually the people using the examples of the chess players, so novice players, they just see that each by each, but expert, the player, they see the patterns. So even though they cannot memorize very detailed information, but they can retrieve very meaningful patterns very easily because they can detect the features and meaningful patterns more easily than novice peoples. And secondly, the expert, they accumulate more content knowledge and organize it in a manner that understanding of the topics. So since they already have a certain pattern of the knowledge, the accumulation of knowledge and memorization is more easier because it's not just the tedious memorization. Their memorization, expertise memorization is more along with a pattern. So it's more easier to accumulate, to reserve the more information. And because of these first two, the features, expert, they can retrieve important aspect of knowledge with little efforts because they see that certain similarities, then they can use the information they saved in their brain more easily. So that's expertise. So we expect that adolescents, that's the time, not just as the novice of each field, but they need to speed up or they have to grow up in the level of expertise, even though they are full expertise, but they kind of beginner expertise, and they have to learn that how to detect the patterns and how to accumulate information, not just detailed information, but using patterns and logics, and also retrieve information more easily with a little effort. So that is another cognitive resources, cognitive capabilities we are expect to see during adolescence. And this is the final, the information processing, the view in terms of the adolescents and their more complex and higher order information processing the capability. We call them metacognition. And when we say that meta, that is above things, so that cognition about the cognition and knowing about knowing. So meta meaning that I know solution, right? So meta meaning that I know the fact that I know certain situation. So that is a two level, the cognition, and two level, the understanding. So kind of it's a complex, but metacognition is very important to have our self-concept. So if you don't know what you don't know, then that is a more lower level of cognitive development. But if you have the metacognition, that is the kind of the post, the former stage of the BIZ theory. We call that is a metacognition. That is necessary to handle complex information later on in our life. So adolescents, they showed the more increased the capacity to monitor and manage. And that's why they can have a metacognition. So we can monitor and what's happened, what I have during my learning and my certain understanding procedure. That's the things. And self-regulation learning is the self-generated, not just is imposed by other people's or teacher-guided learning, but adolescents, they regulate and they guide themselves. And this is my goals, and I can monitor my learning process, and I can set up the small steps of objectives and to speed up my learning. So that is a self-regulatory learning. So probably you remember that when you are in junior high, you learn that how to make a plan ahead of time, and then you just have a weekly plan, and then check that your speed and how much you cover your learning and that kind of things. To do that, you are expect to have that certain the capabilities to do your self-regulatory learning. So that was about the information processing, the perspective that is a more focused on how can we understand making a decision and making a solution and making the progress, and how can we evaluate ourselves. That is more higher order cognitive capabilities is necessary. So that is about the information processing point of view. And changing the topic, this is a psychometric intelligence point of view. And what happened is that the people are getting interested in individual differences. And I want to just ask a question, in what situation people are interested in individual differences in our daily life? Can you think of any? And what situation people wanted to know this person is better than the other person's? That is the time the people want to select as an employer. I want to hire the person, then probably I want to hire the person who can do better in the job. So that's the kind of the selection issues. And also when the people wanted to have the students, and as a president of a university, then we needed to certain information how better or how worse the students are, what's the baseline to see that their progress. So that is the basic idea of individual differences of intelligence. So because of those interested in individual differences in intelligence, what happened is that people develop intelligence tests to show that how much this person's better than the other person's. That kind of information the intelligence test can provide. So the increasing issues in the field intelligence test is that they wanted to show that what kind of components involved in intelligence test. Because in the basic idea is that we want to differentiate and we want to just evaluate the people's the individual differences, but it's getting more complex. What kind of components intelligence test has to involve? So that is more kind of modern issues in these days, and we are going to cover that issues later on. So first, I wanted to show the definition of intelligence. When we say the intelligence, these persons are very intelligent. What does that mean? By definition, intelligence is the ability to solve problems and adapt and learn from experiences. That is intelligence. Is that your definition of the intelligence? And I was just kind of curious. Again, it's the ability to solve problems and then adaptability, and learning from experiences. That is the definition of experiences, intelligence. So the people provide the different idea and different ways to define, even though this is a kind of the basic attitude and basic assumption of the intelligence. I want to show that it's a kind of the diverse idea to approach to the intelligence a little bit different and different emphasis. Sternberg, he assumed that we needed to add the practical knowledge. It's the know-how. That is another aspect of the intelligence, not just the solving problems and or adaptation and learning from experiences. He also focused on practical knowledge, and people know that how to know how the things. That is another aspect of intelligence. That is an addition. And Vygotsky, you remember that he is the later cognitive the theorist after Piaget. He focused on the ability to use the tools of the culture with help from the other teachers or mentors. He believed that that is one of the aspects of the intelligence. So even though there is some common sense of what is the intelligence, but people also shows that different aspect has to be emphasized when we say the intelligence. So intelligence test, this is the first time. Binet, he is a French. It's a very early 1900. That is the time, the beginning, the year to develop the intelligence test. He devised a method of identifying the children who have the learning disability. That was the first original motivation to develop the intelligence test. So they wanted to recognize who had difficulties to learn in school. So in that way, they can provide a special educational environment for that particular children. That was the original motivation. And then after that, at William Stern, he made the concept of intelligence, the quotient, that is IQ. That is the abbreviation of the IQ. That is the intelligent quotient. And this is a formula. And what it is, CA means, CA is a chronological age. For example, if you are 18 years old, then that is your chronological age. And then MA means that is the mental age. So even though you are, the chronological age is 18 years old, your mental age can be like 20, right? Then probably your intelligence is more than higher than 100 because it's multiplied, that is this. So that is a basic concept of IQ, right? So it's a compare your chronological age, what's your mental age is placed based on that. So that is a basic formula, right? So meaning of IQ 100 is that your IQ is exactly similar with your chronological age. So that is the IQ is average of your chronological the age. That is the definition. So you see that this is a normal curve. Actually, Stanford Binet, that's IQ test, is a kind of more developed the scale after Binet. and they're using the normal curve to figure out each person's the IQ. So we have the norms to compare each person's score, IQ score. So you see that here, that is average. As I told you that average in your age, if your score compared to the average of your norm, meaning the chronological age, the similar age people, then your IQ is 100. It's average of your chronological age. But see that if you go this way, then see that this is IQ score. Probably if you take the IQ test, you can get this score. And this score is based on this normal curve. And normal curve is made by all the scores of the chronological, the similar age, the children or adolescents, or sometimes we have norms of the adult. So depending on what norms your scores are compared, probably this your IQ score can be different. So when we say that the IQ score, that is the definition, is your mental age compared by your chronological age. And we have a normal curve based on your norm. So your score can be calculated and based on this norm score. And one of the most widely used in these days is Wechsler scales after the Stanford Binet. And I want to show that Korean Wechsler, this intelligence scale today. There are two parts of the Wechsler scale. First scale is a verbal scale. So usually they ask about the comprehension and how wide the concept people know. So this is kind of answer sheet and to ask the questions, and there is particular items and developed in a particular cultural group, and this is for the Korean version. And another set is non-verbal scale. So this is a kind of the two basic components. And just to show that as an example, we give a certain amount of time and we measure how fast individuals can do and to make this shape, to make the right shape. So this is one of the examples of it. And also this is we shows the certain shape, and the adolescents are required to make the same shape as they see that certain pattern. So this is kind of examples. And also for the verbal questions, we using certain pictures and individual pictures card there, and then ask the people to make a logical sequence of each pictures. That is, and also we measure the time. So when people took the Wechsler, the scales, and they can have two subscales, verbal scales, and then a non-verbal scale. And then total, the IQ score is add to the verbal scales and non-verbal scales. But to using the intelligence test, and we know that the parents are very interested in how my sons and daughters are how smart they are, and also probably you yourself, and you believe that your IQ test tells have some predictability of the academic performance or not. So if you have a high IQ, probably you have a kind of high expectation of the academic performance. But there's some warnings and dangers when we're using the IQ test. Even though there is a very good the motivation originally to develop the IQ test, but there is some dangers and there is some misuses of the IQ. So we have to be very careful using the IQ. So this is IQ. This is just a psychological test. This is a tools. So IQ test score is not necessarily that's the same as intelligence itself. So that is just tools. And tools meaning that we have a certain goals. So as I told you that originally you wanted to help the handicapped, the children to provide more feeding the environment, and that's the goals. Effectiveness of the IQ test depending on the knowledge, skills, and integrity of the users. So if the users don't have information and don't have the knowledge of IQ, background and components and the philosophy, then that is the dangers of it. So if you wanted to use that IQ score, then trying to know that what is the philosophy and what's the basic structure and that kind of information you need to know. And there's some cautions of IQ, avoid the stereotyping and expectation. Sometimes people have that I have very high IQ students and they stereotypically expect that they are going to good at this school, the performance. But it's not necessarily in that way. Or IQ is not really sole indicator of the competence and other things, and like you know that EQ in these days. So it's not IQ is all 100% at the indicator, even though there is a significant contribution to the performance, but it's not 100%. And in these days, as I indicate before, it's not just verbal and non-verbal, simplified IQ components people talking about. It's more diverse idea. Examples of the multiple intelligent test is Gardner. He talking about the 8 frames of mind. And then he suggested not just the verbal and mathematical, that was the major components of IQ, but expand his intelligence definition, including spatial and bodily kinesthetic and musical, interpersonal, intrapersonal kind of things. So these two particular things is related to the EQ, because interpersonal IQ meaning that you know how to communicate with other peoples. And intrapersonal IQ meaning that you know yourself and you have a high level of the awareness of your feelings and you have insight of your own issues. So that also help to have a high level of emotional intelligence. So actually, Daniel Goleman, he find that from the research, not high IQ people have a good promotion, but more high EQ people, they have a more better chance to get promoted in later their life. So in the first stage of employment and high IQ has a good contribution, but later on, its EQ is more important. So we needed to expand that, not just the verbal comprehension things or the basic mathematical things, but other aspects of the intelligence. It's we needed to be considered. Changing the topic is the final topic is social cognition. Understanding the adolescence, this is very important things. And before we just talking about pure cognitive things and understanding and making a decision and intelligence, that's a purely cognitive capability. But here I say that social, meaning that when we're using our cognitive behavior, cognitive capability, it's a social situation, social context. So social cognition is the way individuals conceptualize and reason about the social world. So adolescents, they have a certain, very unique, the social cognitive capability. We call that's egocentrism. Egocentrism is the adolescents, when they understand the social world, they are very self-conscious about themselves. So that is a particular characteristics of the social cognitive behavior during the adolescence. This is 2 examples. Imaginary, the audience, meaning that the adolescents, since they are very focused on themselves, they imagine that they always, other people look at them. That is imaginary audience. So when they do something or behave something, they are very sensitive to audience, imaginary audience, and they kind of very careful not standing out, because they feel that the audience, those in their imagination, always looking at them. So those imaginary audience, that is one examples of high level of egocentrism among the adolescents. Another examples of the adolescents' egocentrism, self-consciousness, is a personal fable. What is that? Explained by the Elkind. He's a social cognitive psychologist, and he using personal fable to explain that adolescents' egocentrism. That is, the adolescents, they make a story of their life as a special things. So, for example, they believe that if I do something, since I'm a very special, like a character of the novel, my love relationship can be very unique. So even though I have sex with my boyfriend, there's no way I can be the pregnant, because my love story is very special. It has to be very beautiful. So they are very ignorant to see that their life is a real life, but they kind of exaggerate the importance of themselves and importance of their relationship, exaggerated. I'm a kind of the center character of the story. So they make a kind of their own story. So, and make themselves is very special in the world. That is one of the characteristics of the adolescents. We call that as the personal fable. These two concepts developed by Elkind. And perspective taking is a very necessary skills an adolescents has to learn. Although they are very self-conscious, they're very focused on their thinking and their emotions, but at the same time, they needed to know how other people feel in this same situation. To have those empathic understanding, adolescents, they have to learn take the other person's perspective. Like take the other person's shoes, and then put on the other person's shoes, and then feel, how does that feel if I take this person's perspective, this person's shoes, and how I feel, how can feel this way. So in that way, we can understand the other person's perspective and other person's emotions and their situation. So in that way, we can have a more empathic understanding, and that is related to the emotional intelligence, as I told you before. So I want to just wrap up today's lecture. We thought about information processing the perspective, and it's more focused on higher order and complex the process to handle information. And also we're talking about the IQ test. Particularly I focus on quotients, and have to be very careful to using the IQ test score. And then finally, we talk about the social cognition.